mistake in how we handle and prepare foods can lead to serious sickness, and the severity usually depends on the kind of microorganism and its effects. For some microorganisms like salmonella, eating any food that contains salmonella, food that is contaminated with salmonella, usually undercooked foods, can result in food poisoning. The signs and symptoms, sometimes diarrhea, vomiting, these are some of the things can happen when someone eats food that is contaminated with salmonella. But for some microorganisms like Clostridium botulinum, just a tiny taste of food that contains Clostridium botulinum can lead to a very serious medical condition like paralysis. And in some cases, it can even result in death. Now, food poisoning is a very serious health condition, and we care about your health, which is why in this presentation, I will be sharing with you some of the measures that this hotel has put in place to protect you from food poisoning. I will also tell you what you should do to protect yourself from food poisoning. My name is Michelle Omadi. I am a registered dietitian with over 15 years of experience. I am also a member of British Dietetic Association. I am a certified food hygiene expert, the head dietitian at Citadel Nutrition Consult, a renowned nutrition clinic that is in partnership with many hospitals and hotels in Nigeria. I welcome you to this online teaching on food poisoning. Thank you. Let's take a look at this topic, preserving palates, protecting health, which is a deep dive into hotel food safety practices for an unforgettable guest experience. Again, my name is Michelle Omadi. In this presentation, you're going to learn what food poisoning is, the signs and symptoms of food poisoning, WHO's rules in food safety, then the hotel's measure to prevent food poisoning, the do's and don'ts as regards food poisoning, how you can protect yourself from food poisoning, and the different food-related terminologies that can be confusing. I'll help you understand the difference between food poisoning and food allergies, food intolerance, yes, so you can be clear on what the situation is. Then I'll also share with you the food hygiene policy applicable in this hotel. Now, what is food poisoning? It's simply any illness that is caused by eating contaminated food. Yes, food that is contaminated. Not because someone is sick or not, but by eating food that is contaminated. That sickness that occurs is what we call food poisoning. Now, foodborne illness caused by bacteria, viruses, parasites, or even chemical substances entering the body through contaminated food. So it doesn't just stop at contaminated foods that have viruses, bacteria like salmonella that I mentioned, or Clostridium botulinum. Even some chemicals inside food can result in what? Food poisoning. What are some of the signs and symptoms? How can one tell if he or she has food poisoning? These are just some signs and symptoms that can help. Feeling sick, you're nauseated, then being sick, vomiting, diarrhea, stomach cramps, abdominal pain, a lack of energy and weakness, loss of appetite, fever, aching muscles, chills. These are just some symptoms. It can be worse than these, but these can tell if one has food poisoning, especially after eating food that is contaminated. Now, what then is the onset of these signs and symptoms? When does it start to manifest? Symptoms usually begin within 2 days of eating contaminated food. Let's say that somebody has eaten food that is contaminated on a Wednesday. The symptoms can begin to show on a Friday, but not always. Sometimes the symptoms can also start a few hours later after eating contaminated food, and it can even stay longer than 2 days, several weeks after the symptoms of food poisoning can manifest. So that also means that you may have eaten contaminated food somewhere, and while you are lodged in the hotel, the signs and symptoms will show. Or you may eat food that is contaminated, and immediately the signs and symptoms will begin to manifest. So it's not cast on stone. It could be 2 days after eating contaminated food. It may be just some hours, few hours after eating contaminated food, or several weeks after eating contaminated food. So a lot of times assessment is required to be able to say that this is the possible cause of food poisoning. Now, some diet tips that can help when someone is down with food poisoning. Rest as much as you can, especially if you're in the hotel because you came for a conference. You still want to make use of that moment. You still want to get the most of your time. So resting can help you get a lot of energy to still attend your conference and still participate in the event. Drink lots of water to prevent hydration. Even if you don't feel like drinking water, just sip. Just sip. Being hydrated can help you when you have food poisoning. Eat just when you feel like eating, and try small light meals. Don't just eat because food is available or eat because you feel you should eat. When you are hungry, that is when you should eat, and especially when you feel up to it. Eat bland foods. Start by eating bland foods. Foods like crackers, bananas, rice puddings, pap, and sugar, but no milk. So these are foods that can help you feel energized before you start to eat main meals. So stay with bland meals for like 2 days and get your energy before you start to eat food. Avoid spicy foods. Anytime you experience food poisoning, try as much as possible to avoid spicy foods. Why? Because this can trigger that condition and make it even worse. Avoid oily foods. Avoid alcohol, caffeine, fizzy drinks. These may make you feel worse. And please consider speaking to or consulting your doctor if symptoms persist or is getting severe. If you're not feeling all right, you're still down, please see a doctor. Now that is it about food poisoning, the signs and symptoms, and some diet tips that can help you. And to the main topic, which is the recommendation of WHO on food safety. There are so many health organizations with their own policies on food safety, but I have chosen WHO because it has just 5 principles, just 5 tips. So they've summarized it into 5. So everything about food safety from WHO perspective can be limited to just 5 topics. Now let's see what WHO says about food safety. Now this is what we have: 5 keys to safer food by WHO. Number 1 is keep food clean. Number 2, separate raw foods from cooked foods. Then cook food thoroughly. Keep food at safe temperatures. And finally, use safe waters and safe raw materials to cook. What are the 5 keys again? Very simple, easy to remember, right? Number 1 is keep food clean. Number 2 is separate raw foods from cooked foods. And number 3 is cook food thoroughly. Then keep food at safe temperatures. Yes, there are safe temperatures for you to keep your food, whether cooked or raw. There are safe temperatures for you to keep that food and prevent food contamination. Then use safe water and safe raw materials. Let's look at these one at a time. Number 1, which is to keep food clean. What are some of the things required? What are the things WHO says we should do to keep food clean? Wash hands before handling food and during preparation. Wash your hands after going to the toilet. Very important. Wash and sanitize all surfaces and equipment used in food preparation. Then protect kitchen areas and food from insects, pests, and other animals. Why? Because microorganisms are carriers or are carried on our hands. So wiping clothes and utensils, especially chopping boards used in food preparation, can contaminate food. So if our hands are clean when preparing foods, it's not likely that that food will be contaminated. If our cooking utensils are clean, we will not contaminate the food. And if we wash our hands after using the toilet before preparation of food, we will not contaminate the food. So you see why WHO says we should keep food clean? Because by doing this, we would not contaminate the food. So this is number one, very simple and straight to the point. Keep food clean. Wash hands before you eat. Wash hands before you prepare your meals. Wash your hands after you use the toilet. Wash your hands when you go out of the kitchen and come back into the kitchen. For the working surfaces, keep clean. Keep the kitchen clean. Keep it away from insects. These can contaminate food. Now, the second point, the second key by WHO is to separate raw foods from cooked foods. This is very important. It's important to separate raw meat, poultry, and seafoods from other foods. They should not be kept in the same place. And food preparation too should be separate. The utensils, the things used in preparing raw foods should be separate from the things used in preparing cooked food. Now, use separate equipment and utensils such as knives, chopping boards for handling raw foods. Store foods in containers to avoid contact between raw and prepared food items. Why? Because raw foods can contain dangerous microorganisms which can now be transferred into other foods during preparation and storage. So if the raw food is contaminated, and it comes in contact with food that is already cooked and will be eaten, what happens? The microorganism moves from the raw food into the cooked food. So it's important to separate raw foods from cooked foods. So WHO's second key says separate raw foods from cooked foods. And the third key by WHO says cook food thoroughly. Cook food thoroughly, especially meat, poultry, eggs, and seafoods. Bring foods like soups and stews to boil to make sure that they have reached a minimum of 70 degrees centigrade. Some say 75 degrees centigrade, but WHO says 70 degrees centigrade. And then reheat cooked foods thoroughly. So if food is already cooked and it needs to be reheated, then we're looking at a temperature of 70 degrees centigrade as minimum. Now, why is it important to cook food thoroughly? Because proper cooking can kill almost all dangerous microorganisms. They don't like heat. So when you cook your food properly, you should be rest assured that the heat has destroyed these microorganisms. Therefore, the food is safe for consumption. So you see why it's important to cook your food thoroughly and be looking at a temperature of 70 to 75 degrees centigrade for that food to be well cooked. And now the next key by WHO says keep foods at safe temperature. Why? WHO says do not leave cooked food at temperatures for more than 2 hours. Many organizations also say 4 hours. So we can work with 2 to 4 hours. So do not leave cooked food at room temperatures for more than 2 hours, maximum 4 hours. Refrigerate promptly all cooked and perishable foods, preferably below 5 degrees centigrade. Keep cooked food piping hot prior to serving, more than 60 degrees centigrade. Do not store food too long, even in the refrigerator. Yes, the food may be cold there, but that does not mean that the microorganisms are not multiplying. So when you keep your foods in the refrigerator, do not keep them for more than 4 to 5 days before you make use of it, either cook or consume. Do not thaw frozen foods at room temperature. Do not bring out food from the freezer and keep it on the tabletop for it to thaw so that you can cook. Why? Because you allow the microorganisms to multiply, and that can result in what? Food poisoning. Why does WHO say we should keep foods at safe temperature? Because microorganisms can multiply very quickly if food is stored at room temperature. So it's either cold or hot. That is the safe thing you should do. Your food is either cold or hot. Now, holding temperatures below 5 degrees centigrade or above for cold foods or above 60 degrees centigrade slows down or stops the growth of microorganisms. Yes, so that is the essence. Remember, the point before this says you should cook food thoroughly, right? And when it's cooked, it should remain hot for 2 to 4 hours, right? Why? Because at this, with this temperature, the microorganisms will not multiply. There is no risk of contaminating the food. So when you consume your food, it is safe for consumption. And for foods that should be cold, it should stay below 5 degrees centigrade according to WHO. And the final point by WHO says, use safe water and save raw materials. Use safe water or treat your water to make it safe. Select fresh and wholesome foods. Choose food processed for safety, such as pasteurized milk, because heat has killed or destroyed the microorganisms in the pasteurized milk. Wash fruits and vegetables, especially if eaten raw, and wash with clean drinking water. Do not wash your fruits and vegetables with contaminated water. Why? Because of food poisoning. So if you're going to eat that food raw, temperature, heat will not destroy the microorganism, then it's safe for you to wash your fruits and vegetables with clean water. Do not use food beyond its expiry date. You remember that food poisoning can be caused by bacteria, viruses, also chemicals. So when the food product says this is the use by date, always comply to avoid food poisoning. Raw materials including water and ice can be contaminated, so be sure to use treated water when you're going to consume that food raw. All right, because this can be contaminated with dangerous microorganisms and even chemicals. All right, so this hotel is a hotel that provides commercial food services. Now, these are some of the food safety practices that have been adapted based on WHO 5 keys to safer food. Let me share them with you. Number one, on keeping food clean. The food handlers in the hotel are mandated to wash their hands before handling food and during preparations. And the hotel also has what we call routine time for washing hands, where all staff leave what they are doing and go to wash their hands, all the staff that handle food. Then a wash hand sink is provided at the entrance of the kitchen for food handlers to wash their hands after going to the toilet. We also have dedicated cleaners who wash and sanitize all surfaces and equipment used for food preparation. Now, that is their responsibility. They are not included in the housekeeping lists. They are not housekeeping staff. They are not cleaners. They just focus on keeping the kitchen areas clean. That is their responsibility, and to sanitize the work surfaces. Then we also carry out routine fumigation of the kitchen areas and keep the environment clean. The fumigation helps to protect the environment from insects, from rodents, and avoid foods from being contaminated. And the food handlers undergo routine food handlers tests to ensure that they are not exposed to transmittable foodborne diseases. So on keeping food clean, these are the measures put in place by the hotel. The next is on the key that says separate raw food and cooked foods. What does the hotel do? At the store, we have separate freezers for various raw foods. The chicken freezer, the fish freezer, the beef and goat meat freezer, all these are kept in separate places so that the use by date can also be applicable. The first one brought in is the first one to be consumed, so it does not stay for too long in the freezers. And then in the kitchen, where food are prepared, we have freezers for raw meats, where only raw meats are kept. Then we also have the freezers for cooked food and cooked meats. Why? To avoid cross-contamination. Yes, when raw food that is contaminated comes in contact with cooked food, what happens? contamination, which can also lead to food poisoning. So to prevent that from happening in the kitchen where food is prepared, we have freezers for what? Cooked food, and we have freezers for raw foods. And even for the utensils used in the kitchen, we also apply this principle of separating the ones used for raw foods from the ones used for cooked foods. For example, the chopping board color coding, the red chopping board should be used for just red meats. That is what we do. The red chopping boards used for red meat, and then the green chopping boards used for salads and even vegetables. So these color code principles are applied in the kitchen to avoid cross-contamination in our meal preparation. Then the third key by WHO, which says that we should cook food thoroughly. In the kitchen, we use food thermometer to ensure that foods are properly cooked. Chicken at 73.9 degrees centigrade, eggs at 71 degrees, beef at a minimum of 62.8 degrees, then the minced meat at 71 degrees centigrade, then fish, seafoods 62.8 degrees centigrade, then our soups at 73.9. So all these are printed and pasted in all the kitchens, and the staff, the cooks, the chefs, the food handlers are trained on how to use the food thermometer to check the temperature of these foods and ensure that they are well cooked. And reheating of already cooked food is minimal, and even when it's done, we ensure that it is piping hot and reaches a minimal temperature of 70 degrees centigrade. And the next by WHO is to keep foods at safe temperatures. So in the restaurant, all meals served are prepared freshly and they are kept hot. Our buffet meals are served hot and kept hot for a maximum of 4 hours, which explains why complimentary breakfast is usually served by what time? 6:30, and by 10 it's cleared off. Not because we do not like the clients, but in complying with this principle on keeping food at safe temperatures, food prepared should be cleared within 4 hours. So this is applied for our breakfast, for our lunch, and even for our dinner. And fixed meal times cannot be adjusted when meals are already prepared, especially for group bookings. When you have called the hotel to say you are going to eat by 2 o'clock, the meal is prepared and set by 2. When you call by 1 o'clock to say please change the meal time, it's usually difficult. Why? Because we have already worked with that time, and taking it back to the kitchen, reheating and bringing it back at a different time, all these errors and mistakes can occur and food is contaminated. So if there's going to be a change in meal time, it has to be communicated 24 hours before that time. It's safer and better for your participants. Then in the store, all the meat products are portioned, washed, and frozen in less than 2 hours of supply. And in the kitchen, frozen meats are thawed under running water or refrigerator, depending on the size of the food to be thawed. All these to comply with WHO's recommendation on keeping foods at safe temperatures. And now the fifth part of using safe water and raw materials. We have registered vendors who supply us most of our raw materials, and we also have food hygiene committee headed by a registered dietitian to receive all kitchen supplies, especially the meat, to ensure that they are received in good condition, to ensure that they are prepared and put in the freezer within the stipulated time. We also have a dedicated cold kitchen where cold dishes like salads, appetizers, dishes that do not require cooking are prepared. We use treated drinking water there. Remember that for raw foods, you should use drinking water, safe water in preparation, because they will be consumed raw. There will be no form of heating to destroy any microorganisms. So the fruits and vegetables first are safe for consumption. They are healthy ones, not the ones that are already contaminated. Then clean water is used in preparation. We do not use unsafe spices and ingredients in cooking. Yes, we have to read the nutrition label before we permit the use of any spice in cooking in the kitchen to avoid food poisoning. So that is all about the measures put in place by the hotel to protect you from food poisoning. These measures are based on the 5 keys of WHO. Now let me tell you what you can do, your responsibilities, still based on the WHO 5 keys on safer food, how you can protect yourself from food poisoning. For the first point that says keep food clean, I encourage you to wash your hands before and after eating, and wash your hands after going to the toilet. Now you will notice that in this hotel, all the restaurants have wash hand basins for your tea break, your buffet. And all the toilets also have functional wash hand sinks so that you can wash your hands after going to the toilet. Then on the second point that says separate raw and cooked food. Well, this is only applicable in your home. At the hotel, we will serve you only cooked, well-cooked foods. Then cooking food thoroughly, ensure you do that at your place. That is what we do in the hotel. Then keeping food at safe temperatures. Consume your food fresh and within 4 hours of preparation. Buffet meals are cleared 4 hours after preparation. Do not take away buffet meals. It is safer for you to order a la carte that will be prepared immediately. Preserve your food properly in the fridge. If you decide to take your food out of the venue or take your food from the restaurant, keep it in the fridge. Do not keep it on the table to avoid multiplication of microorganisms, to avoid food poisoning. So we encourage you to consume your food fresh, and if you're taking it away, please keep it properly in the fridge. And to protect you from food poisoning, we do not microwave and serve meals brought from outside the hotel. Then use safe water and safe raw materials when you cook at home at this hotel. That is already what we apply. Now, food poisoning and other terminologies. I hope you're clear about food poisoning. You're also clear about WHO 5 keys to safety on food poisoning. And I have shared with you the measures that have been put in place by the hotel to protect you from food poisoning and what you should do to protect yourself from food poisoning. Now, let's talk about food poisoning and other food terminologies that can be confusing sometimes. What is the difference between food poisoning and food allergy? What is the difference between food poisoning and food intolerance? Let me explain this to avoid confusion. Now, these are the food terminologies that we will be looking at: food poisoning, food allergy, food intolerance, food dislike, food interaction, and gluten sensitivity. Food poisoning is what I have already discussed. Is an illness that is caused by eating food contaminated with microorganisms or chemical substances. That is already clear. Now, food allergy. What is food allergy? An unpleasant or dangerous immune reaction after a certain food is eaten. The cause is unknown, but these are some signs and symptoms that can show food allergy: tingling or itching, hives, rashes or eczema, swelling of the lips, face, tongue, and throat, wheezing, nasal congestions or trouble breathing, belly pain, diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, dizziness, lightheadedness or fainting. Now, this is not food poisoning. This is what? Food allergy. The immune system reacts to certain foods, and these are the signs that the body will show to tell you that it's allergic. It does not like these foods. These symptoms that I have just talked about, the tingling or itching, hives, rashes, eczema, swelling of the lips, this is food allergy and not food poisoning. Now, FDA allergenic list, this will help you to reduce the number of contacts you will have with allergies, because FDA has put together most of the foods that can cause allergy. But it's important you are sensitive to your system, you're sensitive to your body, to know what your body is allergic to know what you don't like. But this will help you. What are the food products in FDA allergenic list? FDA, which is Food and Drug. We have peanuts, we have fish, chicken eggs, cow's milk, wheat, soy, tree nuts such as walnuts and pecans, crustacean shellfish like shrimps. These are some of the foods that can trigger food allergy, and the treatment will require antihistamine for mild symptoms, and you will need to see your doctor in severe cases. So you're clear about food allergies, right? Let's see the next food terminology, which is food intolerance. This occurs when the body has a chemical reaction to a particular food or drink. The other one, food allergy, is what? Immune reaction. Food intolerance is what? A chemical reaction. For example, lactose intolerance. Where do we find lactose? In milk. Where the system, your digestive system, cannot digest the lactase in the milk, it causes what? Bloating and abdominal discomfort when it's consumed. So we say that this person has what? Lactose intolerance. Now, the difference between intolerance and allergy is that the food allergy is what? Is an immune reaction. The system is trying to fight back. The system perceives that food as threats to your health and is trying to protect you. It's trying to fight back. It's trying to remove those things from the system. So you start to see those signs and symptoms like the rashes, the swelling on the lips. The immune system is reacting to the food. But for food intolerance, it is a chemical reaction. All right? It is not your immune system attacking. It is now your system reacting to the food that it probably cannot digest or still does not like. And for food allergy, a little food can trigger the signs and symptoms. Yes, for foods, see somebody is well, fine, everything is working out well, and person just eats peanut because he or she is allergic to it, immediately you will see signs and symptoms. Person may not have even consumed a bottle of nuts, just a little amount is enough to trigger the signs and symptoms of food allergies. But for food intolerance, a lot of times you may not even notice that you are not tolerating food. Someone who does not like milk can still decide to take milk. Someone who is lactose intolerant can still decide to take milk. Why? Because it's a chemical reaction. The person can still stand it. Now, for food allergy, symptoms are more severe. For food intolerance, symptoms are less severe. For food allergy, it may require medication in most cases. For food intolerance, it may not require medication. So you know the difference, right? Food allergy is an immune reaction. Food intolerance is a chemical reaction. Food poisoning is what? Contaminated food. Let's look at another one, food dislike. This is quite easy to understand. It's just a natural dislike for some certain foods due to maybe the taste, smell, appearance, bad memory. There is no immune or chemical reaction after consumption. You just don't eat. Oh, I don't eat fish because I don't like how it smells. That is what? Food dislike. I don't eat this because I didn't like it as a child. That is what food dislike. There is no issue. If you choose and decide that you want to eat it, you can still go ahead and eat it. Not eating it has nothing to do with immune or chemical reaction. It's just a natural dislike for the food. So that is what we call food dislike. Now, food interaction. What is that? This refers to interactions that occur between specific foods or food components. Sometimes the outcome of food-food interaction can be good and it can also be bad. And sometimes this food-food interaction is usually misconfused as food poisoning. But let me give you a clear explanation. Orange juice that is taken after eating bean pottage is what? A good food-food interaction. Why? Because the vitamin C in the orange will enable your body to absorb the iron in the bean pottage. So this is a good combination. It's a good reaction. It's a good mix-up because you're going to be getting a lot of vitamins and minerals from this combination. But look at this. Milk containing tea, you take tea after you eat bean pottage. That is what? A bad food-food interaction. Why? Because the calcium in the milk will hinder the absorption of the iron in the bean pottage. And apart from that, the gas in these two can result in bloating. It can even result in diarrhea. Somebody can even vomit after eating this, and they might now think that, oh, this is food poisoning. No, it's not. This is food interaction. So when you are not sure on how to combine your food, this hotel has a food hygiene expert who you can ask, please, how do I combine these foods, if you are not sure on the combination. So food interaction is different from food poisoning. Food poisoning is as a result of food that is contaminated. Food interaction is combining foods that should not be combined and eaten together. Now, gluten sensitivity. An immune reaction to eating gluten, which is a protein found in wheat, barley, and rye. Now, gluten sensitivity is almost the same as food allergy. The only difference is that gluten sensitivity is now for certain foods, mainly gluten products. So, food allergy is for many foods like peanuts, like tree nuts, like cow's milk, like wheat. But for gluten sensitivity, it's mainly food products that contain gluten, like bread, pasta, noodles, biscuits, pastries, or soups that have been thickened with wheat, with refined wheat flour. So that is gluten sensitivity. And you would expect that the signs and symptoms will be similar with the signs and symptoms of food allergy. This gluten sensitivity is also called celiac disease. Yes, it's also called celiac disease. Now, that is all about the food terminologies, and I hope you are clear and you can tell the difference between food poisoning and food allergy, food intolerance, food dislike, food interaction, and gluten sensitivity. So you know which is which. Finally, before I go, let me now share with you the food safety policies put in place in this hotel to protect you from food poisoning. Food safety policy for the hotel. The food safety policy, we have food safety policy for staff, we have food safety policy for our guests. We also have special dietary need form because of food allergy and food intolerance, other food related conditions, and we have food poisoning assessment. These four form the policies that we put in place in the hotel. Now, the food safety policy for staff. The hotel's food handlers must be trained on food safety. We have training for food handlers on food safety principles. They are also certified on food safety. The hotel participants, the food handlers in the hotel are certified on food safety. Then they all sign, apart from being trained and certified, they all sign the hotel's policy document on food safety in compliance to say that I am trained and I know what I should do, and I sign that I will comply to the hotel's policy on food safety. So these are the things that we have put in place in the hotel to prevent food poisoning. Now, food safety policy for guests. For all events in this hotel that require feeding of participants, there will be a 10-minute talk education on food safety. This will be handled by the in-house food hygiene experts. So for group reservations, you'll be required to also sign that you clearly understand and will abide by the stipulated food safety principles. Then the special dietary needs form. The account officer, the salesperson that you are working with, will provide a soft copy for you to distribute among your participants so that people who have food allergies can indicate that they have food allergies, list out the foods, and there will be some modifications on their own foods or recommendations as to the foods that they can eat to prevent what? Food allergies. And if you are not clear on what you should eat, speak with the food hygiene expert in the hotel and you will be guided on how to combine your foods and prevent food interaction. Now, in the case of food poisoning, in the case of any outbreak, our food safety committee will carry out an investigation, ask affected persons questions about food consumed, and also carry out laboratory analysis of food served at the hotel. A sample of food prepared is usually kept for some days in case there is food poisoning, so that it can be analyzed to determine if that is as a result of food contaminated within the premise or from elsewhere. In summary, our discussion today has centered on the critical importance of food hygiene and safety in both commercial and domestic settings. We've explored key principles such as proper hand washing, storage techniques, temperature control, and cross-contamination prevention. Now, by adhering to these practices, we can reduce the risk of foodborne illnesses and ensure the well-being of consumers. Remember, maintaining food safety is a shared responsibility. As we do ours as food handlers, we expect you to do yours as a consumer. And so, let's prioritize food hygiene and safety in all aspects of our lives to promote healthier communities and prevent unnecessary illness. Thank you very much for listening and being part of this online training on food hygiene, on food safety. I invite you to be my friend on social media, Dietitian Michelle. Thank you and have a lovely day. Bye.